ideas for this implementer forum and how we actually want to achieve these goals. So just a short recap. We have some concerns with OpenSCENARIO at the moment as Bosch, as the tier 1. And we have the problem that OpenSCENARIO 1.0, which is in standard at the moment, is a proprietary language which was once transformed to a standard. And it is a very basic language with static scenarios or quite static scenarios and easy to parse because it's XML based. And what we see here is that even for this simple language, the interpretation of the tool vendors is quite differing. It's ambiguous. And the other big problem we see as the tier 1 is that most of the tool vendors do not support it fully. And this is a problem because OpenSCENARIO 1.0 is a pretty simple language, and still we are not able to use it as how we want to use the standard. So this is our actual concern with 1.0, and we have our troubles with it. And now we are seeing that OpenSCENARIO 2.0 is also should be released next summer. And if you look at OpenSCENARIO 2.0, we have this huge new list of new concepts. They are really cool, they sound really cool, but a lot of them are very ambiguous and some of them are barely understood. And this actually scares me a little bit. If the tool vendor landscape cannot even implement 1.0 fully. So we have this new list of concepts which sound cool, but as they are not implemented yet, and parts of it not even understood by the full group, I'm not even sure if all concepts are mature enough to become a standard. So I'm really scared that we rush a few concepts inside this language, which may not scale at the end, but we will come to that. And the next thing is from a tier 1 or OEM perspective, we have the problem that once OpenSCENARIO 2.0 is released next summer, regulatory authorities will use it and we will have to implement it. And of course, we have then the big problem that most tool vendors also said, it will be difficult to parse OpenSCENARIO, to compile OpenSCENARIO 2.0 scenarios. We're not sure if we can support that yet. So maybe we as OEMs or tier 1s have this situation where we have this product and we want to validate it with the rules, and we cannot do it because we have this we don't have the simulation tools for it. So that's from a tier 1 perspective, and this is, in my perspective, not what a standard should be. It should be like a huge, a broad landscape of tool vendors can proceed with, go on with it, can compile it, we can share it. This is what a standard for me looks like. So from a Bosch perspective, we said that we want this language to be stable. And these points here are no bummer, but I'm still gonna list them up. We as Bosch say that OpenSCENARIO should just merge major concepts. Everyone knows, everyone in software development knows about the big danger of technical debts and the huge problem of legacy systems where you have all these old concepts inside and you have to still maintain them because once, like 5 years ago, you just added it and now you're still maintaining it and the problems are getting worse and worse. So we want to avoid that. We want that we only have this major concepts, and if you look in other language developments like C++, they're actually doing it, and these are the most stable languages. And also we want these concepts to be well understood, to be implementable, and implementable with reasonable effort. In our opinion, a standard should be here to help to allow new simulation tool vendors to provide new products, and that not to be a big hurdle for them. Also, we want to encourage OpenSCENARIO 2.0, the OpenSCENARIO 2.0 concept project, the project that we try to concern these concepts more individually, so we can look at them self-contained, we can evaluate them, and this really helps us to identify these different concepts and also to evaluate them later on. And yeah, the last one is that we should use existing concepts. We should not reinvent the wheel again. We should try to keep with commonly accepted terminology and etc. But this is a no-brainer, I guess. And also we have for OpenSCENARIO here very OpenSCENARIO specific claims. One thing is that we want a conversion with OpenSCENARIO 1.x. We don't want to develop here yet another language. We want to converge them because having two standards in parallel it's dangerous. It can kill both at the end, because at the end maybe both are not fully supported, and at the end nobody will use it. And another thing is that we want to have OpenSCENARIO 2.0 within a reasonable time lane. We are promising the people since 2 years now that we are bringing here OpenSCENARIO 2.0, and I know standardization is a long and painful process. That's true, but at the end we have to bring a first version so people can start. And in our perspective, it's okay if this first version does not include all of the concept, but we have all the most important concepts inside and people can start already. So how can the implementer forum help with the OpenSCENARIO 2.0 development? We as Bosch think that each of the concepts we develop here in OpenSCENARIO 2.0 should be evaluated and validated independently. And this could be done or should be done by an implementer forum where we all discuss a concept, where we say, first, we discuss it, and we will find out if this concept is well understood. So we have this example scenario, we make and discuss it on this example. And if we are sure enough that we understood what the other groups want from us, then we can talk about potential implementation strategies. And we can maybe at this point we already find out that some of these concepts are not even solvable, or are just solvable for just the small demo scenarios. It's a specific doubt I have. Some of the concepts, in my opinion, work for small scenarios, but if you want to scale them on more complex scenarios with junctions, etc., and way more cars, etc., I have the fear that they are not solvable anymore. So I want that we first agree that we understand it fully with the documentation we get, and also with feedback from the groups. Then we discuss, are there potential strategies to solve this problem? And as a third step, as a homework, I would ask all the implementers to implement it, all the tool vendors, and they should implement it and report some feedback. So these are the 3 steps I want to see from each concept we bring in OpenSCENARIO 2.0. And I think this should be also mandatory to for the next release. And how I see the output of the implementer forum is at the end, probably end of next year or something like that. Sorry, in the mid-year, we have this list. We have identified different concepts here, like, for example, the temporal composition, the composites. We have identified the concept of the new syntax, how to parse it, etc. We identified, for example, constraints as a concept, the coverage things as concepts, modifiers, and domain model. This could be way more fine granular, but yeah, we keep it like that at the moment. And at the end, all of the implementers should give a feedback, how well they understood it from 1 to 10, for example. They should give feedback what they think, how solvable this thing is. And they also should provide feedback what they think or what their experience is, how implementable it is. And I hope with this list, we can identify concepts very soon, which are the pain points of OpenSCENARIO. And then with this identification, we can proceed by sorting these concepts in maybe the 2.0 version, and maybe we can identify concepts which may need an extra round, and we can use it for OpenSCENARIO 2.1 as a potential strategy. And how does Bosch want to contribute with this for this implemented form? Actually, we are in the process of contributing some exemplary implementation framework of OpenSCENARIO 2.0. We want to do that in OpenPath. It's not meant to read everything from OpenSCENARIO 2.0, but in this exemplary framework, we already solved things like composites, constraints, coverage is possible, and the syntax with the grammar, etc. We solved that. We know how this works. We know we can give feedback how well we understood this, how well we solved that, and how well we think this is implementable. And I would like to see all the other implementers also giving feedback on that. And yeah, that's actually my vision for OpenSCENARIO 2.0, that we make here some first step. We make here maybe these first steps, and we have the version 2.0, and then we proceed, and we make a 2.1 version or 2.2 versions with all these concepts which may not be mature enough. Yes, and that was it from my side. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Max. Then that leads us into the interactive part of today. First off, any questions or comments towards Max's presentation?
Yeah, 3 comments. So first, I think that the understanding that 2.0 is not the end of the road was always there. Technology will evolve, the standards will evolve, and in fact, if you look at the classical roadmap that ASAM has of converging OSCE 1 path and OSCE 2 path, you do see revisions. So it should be in the back of all of our minds that we are right now at the start of a long journey. And there will be revision, there will be follow-on projects where the standard will be refined and enhanced. The other thing is that I was confused by some of the comments in the first page on convergence with OpenSCENARIO 1.0. But on a second thought, given the proposal in the second and third slides, I don't think we should look backwards, but rather look forward. I think that the idea to have some implementers doing some initial implementation is an excellent one. If Bosch is willing to contribute resources to do that, that's even better. And in that case, I would also challenge you, Max. We are desperately looking for a leader for this forum that will lead all these implementations. So I'm throwing the glove, and hopefully you can pick up the glove and lead this whole implementation effort.
Thank you for this honor, but I have to reject it because I'm also the main implementer, so I can contribute by with some slides and can assist the project leader, but I don't have the capacities to manage everything.
But we can nudge to another Bosch employee who's here also representing not just Bosch, but also Eclipse, Andy Rixinger from the OpenRDX project. Maybe just a slight nudge in your direction as well. This might be a great interface opportunity to bring that in there.
In the context of OpenADX or to Bosch or both.
Everything.
Yeah,
everything.
To be honest, I'm currently not aligned with Max, so I will do that offline, of course. Yeah, one of the reasons why I'm participating today is of course to see how we or how you can use OpenADX to bring here the implementations forward. I guess we can, yeah, we can use the OpenADX community as well, because at Eclipse. So just one remark. So I was 10 minutes late, so I did not get the first 10 minutes, and I'm not sure if you are speaking also about open source solution or only about commercial solutions. So I guess it will be a kind of mix. So Carlo mentioned, yeah, you have to look on, yeah, if you're a commercial implementer, then you should be first on the market. And so I focus more on the open source implementations. And there's also currently a new project in the line of the Eclipse Foundation. It's called Scenario Architect, where you have a kind of graphical user interface. And I guess the technology underlying on that is OpenSCENARIO or could be OpenSCENARIO. I think we will have there some benefits if we use both together. So then you have, if this is wanted, so I'm also not sure if this is required here to have a kind of graphical user interface for building scenarios. But of course, I have that on the screen. This is why I'm here, and I'm trying to bring the things together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. And I think that's something that we in this group need to decide. I mean, we talked about it briefly. You mentioned Carlos said it, right? So we're looking here at also, do we use any tooling in this forum? If so, do we use any open source solutions? Do we use partial proprietary solutions? I don't know, right? So that's also something that we need to discuss here completely.
I don't think that the question is do we, Ben? The question is how can we? The whole desire for the implementers forum is to start and struggle with implementation issues. Mm-hmm. You see, Max is finding some troubles in implementation. Other people may find other troubles. I think that the question that I'm struggling with is how can you get actual people to start work on the implementation? Because what Max was proposing was either a software project or a collection of software projects, okay, on a voluntary basis almost. Now, we are right now in the process of recruiting people's brains for producing documents, which is the standard definition. And you know, it's tough in some meeting and some work groups, as some people here can testify. So the real question on the implementers forum, I think the motivation is right, the outcome is desired, everything. How can you actually get people to do that? Carlo was trying to put some commercial motivation. If you will be first to the market, yes, you have motivation. Okay, so for commercial tool suppliers, that should be a motivation to experiment and invest resources. Other than that, I don't know exactly who will be willing to contribute, and I think that's the struggle here. It's not really a discussion on the what we want to produce. I think it's the how to get there.
Yeah,
that's actually the point. I was just let's say teasing a little bit. Because as from the side of Bosch or BMW, we're actually not tool vendors. So we're not producing commercial tools. So our efforts and resources will go into open source tools. And as OpenPass is also a project from BMW, this is for us the perfect, let's call it playground to work that out. So our efforts will mostly go into this direction. And I think it's not, from a marketing perspective, great if only the open source tools are able to work with the new language.
Yeah, I'm also fully with you. So from my point of view, not from the Bosch, not complete Bosch point of view. So from OpenADX point of view, we are also investing in open source, but currently the problem is due to the Corona crisis that everyone is limited with a budget and capacity to that. But I am really sure that we found here within this, I would say it's not a small community, within this community in this telco today, some small capacities to bring that together, because I often heard, okay, in this tool we use OpenSCENARIO, and we also use OpenSCENARIO. Yeah, in OpenSCENARIO we have it here as input. So I often heard that, and I'm sure that everyone is interested to bring that forward. And if we spend, every one of us, really a small amount of our capacity, then we have a bigger capacity to bring things forward. And as Carlo mentioned, if some of the commercial tool vendors pick up that thing, then we have more than one tool. And I guess that should be at the end the solution, to have more than one tool. Some commercial tools can also base on open source technology we implement here. And let's try to find a way to do that.
I mean, the intent is also not to have this big open source thingy which can do everything of OpenSCENARIO 2.0, or maybe it will be at the end, who knows. But one thing is that we talk about this concept, and while we are talking and evaluating, we ask the implementers from the individual simulation tool vendors and ask, hey, what was your experience with implementing this? And if they say, hey, no, we didn't do that yet, we get a pretty good feeling where they struggle or how far the acceptance of OpenSCENARIO 2.0 is. And I think this is a good sanity check for us to rethink, do we want all of these concepts, for example, if they even struggle with the first 3 concepts.
In addition, I would like to emphasize what the rationale also is behind an implementation in OpenPass that we're doing. Is what we're using as resources are the ones that we have been given by a research project. So we have the set level 4 to 5, it's called set level now only. And I think most of the German tool vendors, or some of the German tool vendors, are also part of that project, and they committed resources on specific topics. The topics can be shifted a little bit to what you desire. So it's not set in stone what you have to do there. So we take that and say, okay, let's do an implementation for OpenSCENARIO 2.0, and we get a cross-funding for that. And we can publish it on a platform like set level in order to get international recognition. So, and this is just a blueprint that I want to give you as an idea on how you could cross-finance basically your implementation ideas.
So maybe we can get some input from some of our proprietary tool vendors here. I mean, I'm looking here at a couple. We have Vector. Maybe Max, you could provide some thoughts and comments on how you would see this, how you yourself being able to benefit from this, but more importantly, how would you be able to bring in your implementation specific topics? I mean, would you think about sharing your sub implementations, or how would you approach such a forum like this?
To be honest, I have no idea. To be honest, I have no idea, because it's always a matter of the resources question. Everybody talks about this. It's a matter of capacity and so on. The problem is not that we need to invest to do this. The problem is that we need human manpower to do it. It's not a matter of money, it's a matter of people, and we don't have so many people that we can do everything at the same time. We are participating so much in so many ASAM projects, and we investing already a lot of time in these projects. So be it OpenSCENARIO 1, be it OpenSCENARIO 2, be it OpenDrive. This costs us a hell lot of time. And to be honest, I have no idea how we could spend even more time for the ASAM projects. So to me, it's just a matter of that we have a time problem. All of this will take much more time than everybody hopes it will take.
But maybe then I can turn that around and say, well, the intent of this form is not to cause more work for you, but rather to save on workload further down the line. So assuming that in the development work that you're involved in, you are already doing some form of an implementation or testing in your own tools. The idea is not to make you repeat that in any sense, but take what you're doing already and allow this to be complemented by discussions in this forum. That's the way I'd see it, at least. And I guess the question there towards you then is, do you see any activities that you're doing internally that would be complemented by the work in this forum? And if so, how and where?
I could imagine that it definitely makes sense. So whenever there's some kind of a draft release or anything of concepts that we should implement, we will try to do this, but also this will take time. It's not that if there is a draft, we will implement it in 1 week. It will take months. So, well, at least a couple of weeks. So I'm just afraid of the timeline of all of what we do.
So I think that's okay. There are two aspects here of your answer. The first one is that's the feedback I get from a lot of tool vendors, that they don't have the time because so many ASIM projects and they have to attend everywhere. But a lot of tool vendors honestly seem to have problems to implement it. And it's not good if OpenSCENARIO 2.0 will end like OpenSCENARIO 1.0, where the tool vendors in half a year start implementing it. So the second aspect is that I would like to have this as a starter for the tool vendors. I want to stimulate them. I want to help them as well. I want to share knowledge. I'm trying to put some knowledge in, and I hope other bring also knowledge in, and so the tool vendors can actually implement it. And if this is not possible till the end, then we have a big problem, in my opinion. This could be a potential end of OpenSCENARIO 2.0, or it's dangerous. If we are not able to share as a tier 1 or OEM, we have problems.
I would actually say differently. It's not the end of OpenSCENARIO 2.0. It would eventually be the end of all the tools that are not able to go with time. So those are concepts which are with good reason inside that project, as we all expect that the methodology of coverage-driven testing is something that we need in the close future. So we have OpenSCENARIO 1, which is adopted, and which is without a doubt the ones that are, for example, at BMW used also right now. I cannot speak for someone else, but if somebody decides to not invest into implementation, which is, in my opinion, the most important one, then it will just be a very hard disadvantage.
I didn't say in any term that we will not invest in the implementation. So maybe this was misunderstood.
Let's hold on. All the people that are working for commercial tool vendors, they need to see the money at the end of the tunnel. If there is no money at the end of the tunnel, there will be no justification to invest people in implementing it, regardless of all the idealism that is being expressed here of sharing and knowledge sharing. Overall, those companies do not exist for the benefit of humanity, but rather to make money. So I support Carlo's opinion that all the concepts there and the needs are due to needs of the current technology. And once these tool vendors will be convinced that this is needed, they will invest the time. But remember, we have some chicken and egg here. Okay, I saw a question that popped up in the channel. Is there a grammar file available? And I'm sure that Pierre will say soon. Okay, because the syntax group hasn't finalized the syntax yet. So with all due respect, coming to Max and asking him, why aren't you implementing? His first answer should be, first, what problem am I solving? And second, what should I implement? And currently there are no answers to these.
Yeah.
Right?
So how do we create
to the first
this?
one, maybe to the first one of what problem am I solving? But what should I implement? It's not there yet.
But we can already start it with, because what I did is, because we don't have a syntax, I defined some similar syntax and I compiled this one. And what I did is I looked in the what composites are there, and I implemented and I checked, okay, it's still possible. If you have the chicken egg problem, you have to start at both ends, right?
Yeah, and I mean,
So
not everything is of the same order of importance, I would say. So I really liked Max's presentation in putting some of the pressure points on the table. And I think grammar is very likely not one of them. I mean, we might screw the grammar up completely, and then, yeah, you can go to us and yell at us. But it's very unlikely that we will come up with something that's not a context-free grammar, and that's it. And then you just get a student to implement it. So that's not going to be the key point in terms of implementability of this language. I think some of the more advanced concepts, like constraints, for example, their interaction with the execution, the specific nature of modifiers, I'm in complete agreement. Those are going to be pressure points, and that's why I think it's also not enough to say, yeah, let's wait for the first draft or for the final draft, and then we start implementing. Then we find out that certain stuff is really problematic from an implementation strategy point, because and there's where I slightly differ with Max's presentation. I don't think it will be a mix and match, a pick and choose approach in the end. Because if the language is any good at all, it will be an ecosystem. It will not be a loosely flying formation of independent concepts, because that's just not a language, that's just a collection of concepts. So the individual context will have to be adjusted to match each other and make a complete whole. And so if we find out very, very late in the game that certain concepts don't make sense or can't be implemented or are immature, it will not just be a simple solution saying, yeah, we just release everything except modifiers, for example. Because, for example, if we drop modifiers, the whole domain model, for example, must change, because right now it is going to be keyed towards modifiers being available and being the way to go to specify certain aspects of the actions that are going to be taken. So that's really the key issue in any kind of implementers forum, in any kind of language design, is to, prior to finalizing the language specification, of making sure that the concepts are mature enough and well understood enough that implementation even makes sense. And that's why I'm not that interested actually in full implementations of everything. I mean, for sure, full implementations are always nice to have, and I'm a sucker for implementations. But really, what must happen first is we must make sure that the development inside the development projects is meeting the goal of producing something that is widely implementable. And that, I think, is the key goal. And I think that's also the key motivation, because as Max already also pointed out, if we release this language and it is not mature in that sense, and it presents huge problems in terms of implementation or in terms of compatibility between implementations, we are all going to suffer from that, because the expectation by users and by authorities will be, yeah, we can use OpenSCENARIO 2.0. And if we then find out that implementation is really difficult and hard to do, we have a huge problem also in terms of commercial prospects, because that then will will be a problem for everyone who just finds that out once the standard is finished. So I think that for me is, by the way, the motivation. So we are also a tool vendor, though a very small one, and we definitely want to be sure that we can implement OpenSCENARIO 2.0. And now is the time to make sure that at least in general we can do so. If we can't do this, and if we find out, for example, that modifiers need more definition, I think the answer will not be to just vote it out at the end, but we may have to make sure now that either modifiers get better, more well defined, or restricted in what they actually are, or we have to design the rest of the language in a way that allows modifiers to be optional or something that's added later. And we will need time for that. And so we must know this fairly soon, and not at the middle of next year or at the end of next year, because then it's going to be too late. If we also want to arrive at the other thing that's demanded of us, I mean, we are seeing end users claiming that OpenSCENARIO 2.0 must come very soon, which then is sometimes invalidated by saying, yeah, but actually we like OpenSCENARIO 1.x better. So if you want like 1.x better, then why are you in such a hurry to get 2.0? But I think for certain problems, 2.0 really brings new stuff to the table that people need, and the pressure is increasing to get that. So we don't have infinite time, and we can't take 3 years, 4 years to have a first release. So I think this group must be the one to actually speed up some of the things that we need in order to release. Now I'll shut up.
Nicholas, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So I've been thinking a little bit if, I hope this is not a Pandora's box, but if we should sort of reevaluate or widely consider what do we expect out of a 2.0 release. Frankly, if you asked me even a year ago if 2.0 would be available in May, I would have said that's a very aggressive. And after the whole year we've had with all the complications, it's even more complicated. And some of these issues brought up for the forum are really crucial, to test some of the things that will be published in a document in the summer before they are put in the document to, as Pierre was saying, not put out these concepts that then become big problems in the future. So from the domain and the language features point of view, you could consider 2.0 would have to cover a lot of use cases and a lot of possibilities and a lot of workflows, and you have to put sort of a very wide base of features to be covered. But on the other hand, if you look at the importance of testing before you put it on a spec in the ASAM website, maybe we should consider that 2.0 should be a very minimal set of, as Max said, widely understood concepts that have been tested through some minimal implementations before they are put on the PDF. And therefore, what would be most pressing for our project from now until the January face-to-face meeting would be to really prioritize the most core concepts that provide the most minimal domain that we should put out there for 2.0, which has a chance of being tested through implementation before the summer, and look to add new features in 2.1 or 2.2, but limit the scope of the first release so that we get a quick release, but with tested features. We cannot get a quick release with tested features with wide domain and wide new language features. So how do we prioritize which language features and which domain areas we cover for 2.0 while going through an acceptable level of scrutiny by implementers before they get published?
So, Nicholas, can you give examples of what you would consider testing?
Well, to go through, for example, the cycle that Max Bauer was proposing of evaluating if they are widely understood within the project, if they are solvable and implementable and scalable, as he suggested.
Well, there is one, I'm trying to see, there is a boundary line between brain work, which means let's think about it, let's analyze it, let's design something, versus actual implementation. Max was suggesting to go for actual implementation. When you refer to testing, are you also referring to actual implementation?
That's a good question. I mean, that's something to consider, but maybe this should be a requirement that we have at least a minimal implementation of certain concepts before they are published. I mean, that's a hard decision to make. I don't.
Okay.
To correct this, I did not suggest that everybody should implement it. I would like to see these 3 steps, that we first discuss it, then we first discuss it, if it's solvable and how it would be solvable. And I would like, but not mandatory, that it's someone implements it and shows, hey, I did it. But it could be proprietary. But it should be visible, and for other implementers, it should be clear. Okay, I'm aware how to implement that now. It is nice to have an implementation, but I'm not sure.
Is this something that's easiest done through example? I mean, as you guys been talking, how about we just think of 1 or 2 topics that, for those of you also involved in the development project, think just based on your experience might be high priority topics that need to be discussed from this perspective, from this forum. Pick 1 of those or 2 of those and just have a first discussion on it to see if we can convince people that there's a value in discussing it prior to investing all the even more resources at ASAM. And is there a benefit for me as a tool vendor to be seen in these discussions? And of course, I'm assuming the answer to that question will be yes. Based on that, how do we extend this list, and how do we make progress with continuing to discuss each of these individual topics on the list? Maybe then we can think about asking 1 or 2 people that to provide an example implementation of 1 of the topics. I mean, Max, you say you've got some example implementations for some of the concepts. This might be a good starting point, and maybe this will also give us some momentum and also give others sort of the motivation to start providing some sub implementations for comparison or something along those lines.
So before we go there, I would like to throw in another challenge. One possible path that has been discussed is to see how we can collaborate and leverage with the Eclipse Foundation on the different projects there, whether it is OpenPass, OpenADX, or whatever we have there. The other direction that is being expressed here is other implementers, like from the commercial companies, coming and sharing, and others. Now, I would like to really address a question for both Max and Michael, coming from Vector and DSpace, and to ask them, when they will look at support for OpenSCENARIO 2.0, how much implementation constraints are imposed on them from existing software infrastructure that they will need to reutilize, compared to the freedom of completely different implementation, and to get their assessment how much of this they will really be able to share and learn from each other, given that these are different worlds. So Max or Michael, if you are willing to comment, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I can try to give an answer. It's not so easy. So there will for sure be some implications of architecture that is currently already implemented in our tools. It will have implications on how to support OpenSCENARIO 2, this language-based approach of a scenario definition, and so on and so. I think it's not easy. Maybe it's not even possible to quantify it actually. So I don't know how to answer it, to be honest. But one thing I wanted to add is that in the end, the standard is one of the main things that users of the standard expect, is that you can actually use it to exchange a scenario definition between different parties, different tool vendors, like homologation authorities, whatever. So that that all of those parties who contribute or support by tools or whatever, all of those parties have to have the same understanding of this language and what it means and what it actually should result in simulation. And I think it's not so easy to do it like on a completely like theoretical level. So you have to test it out somehow. That's my point of view, in order to make sure that release will be successful of this language.
But by the way, so I don't want to cut off anyone else, but by the way, that exactly in a nutshell is what I think the Implementers Forum is all about.
Yes.
Ensuring exactly the degree to which someone has to implement something to check it. I mean, that will differ between the different concepts and between the different implementations, but really making sure that this agreement on what the standard even means doesn't start from scratch once we release and everyone just starts reading the standard, but already starts before that. So as an example, for the constraints, currently my understanding and my feeling as one of the parties also trying to design that part of the language is that the constraints can be solved prior to each separate subpart of a scenario being executed. And I would find this very important for implementation reasons. But that might not really be true, or we might differ in our view on that. And then that's something that we should find out now to make sure that then the standard says whatever we think it should say in very clear terms, and there's no hidden gotcha anywhere hidden there. Because if we only start doing this once 2.0 is released, we get into exactly this problem.
Yeah.
But Maximilian maybe also wants to say something.
Yeah, so actually there's not much to add. So as Michael already said, there's certainly a bigger impact on redesign internally, because of course we have a proprietary scenario definition for many years, and it will certainly not suit the needs of the standard. So there's a lot of refactoring required, and as Michael already said, it's very hard to quantify the effort to do this.
Yeah, starting on a greenfield is obviously much simpler than taking an existing architecture and a proprietary road and scenario models to adapt them to this completely new approach. And
especially if you have a hell lot of customers that are still using your old stuff, you need to provide both worlds to your customers, and that's really kind of impossible.
That's a perfect example of technical debt. If you have, for example, sometimes images, concepts, or you have went in one direction, it's hard to change the direction at some point. This is why I'm trying that we validate if we can do it with your existing systems, right? That it's somehow possible, and we don't break all the tool vendors here directly. We don't kill everyone. That.
And this is coming back to what I said in the beginning. We as Vector, we are very much willing to participate in such kind of implementers forum, and I'm sure we can achieve what we want to achieve, but I'm very sure we cannot achieve it in the time frame that everybody's looking for. And I know nobody wants to hear this, but this is real life.
So, I guess you are right, yes.
Yeah, I mean, what time frame are we speaking about? I don't think that we're so coupled to the release of the version 2.0, right? It's not going to result in a hard cut. It's a continued process that's going to take part here. And I think that extends the time frame significantly. If you look at the experience in OpenSCENARIO 1.0, that's a much longer time frame in any case. Here we're starting earlier than we did there.
But yeah, but I would argue that, I mean, certain stuff we have to do prior to the release of 2.0 if we want to have it the proper impact. And I share the concerns that, of course, not everything will be done by the middle of next year. But that's the major reason why I want us to start doing stuff, because we want to find out soon. Because from my point of view, an outcome out of this activity is always, and out of the other activities is always that, yeah, we are just not ready for release by whatever time we have in mind in the roadmap. Well, we are all working to make that roadmap reality, because on the other hand, all of the customers are claiming they need it right now. If we find out that it is not doable, if we find out in very specific terms that certain stuff really is not ready, then I would want to find that out, and I would rather then adjust the schedule based on this, rather than release something that's obviously immature. But in order for us to do this, I think my key concern is that everyone is taking a wait and see approach and saying, yeah, it seems unreasonable to release by middle of next year, and hence everything gets pushed back ever more, and that makes it even more unreasonable on the one hand, but even more reasonable on the other hand, because if there's no pushback on certain features, then it will just be accepted, because we know that paper is really something that offers little resistance. So we can write down all kinds of concepts, and by superficially glancing at them, they all make sense, it seems. But then we find out after the release that they are actually undefined or underdefined. And so I think, so personally, I'm very aware that the current schedule we are pushing is not not the most realistic one in terms of, yeah, we will definitely be finished by then. But the only alternative is, so I don't see the alternative of now pushing back the release and that magically makes stuff happen. I would rather make stuff happen and then that pushes back the release.
Yeah, from my point of view, that's a perfect argument for Nicolas' proposal on really concentrating on the key things of the language, and this is, from my point of view, this is a problem that has been, or an error that has been made for the 1.0 release. So it already contains, it is, I agree, it is kind of a simple language, but it already contains a lot of stuff, a lot of flexibility and options, and this is one of the main reasons why it's not so widely accepted until now, because you wanted to support every bit you can imagine, but we have to concentrate on like the things that everybody can agree on, like Vector can agree on stuff in the language, and DSpace and other parties also, and this is the things that should be in the language for the first version, and from there on we can make extensions and whatever, but we have to take a look at the things that we all can easily agree on, and that is exchangeable in the end. And if we make it too complex right from the beginning, then this will be quite hard to achieve.
But again, I think this is something that must be coming from a forum like this one. So, I mean, I think right now it seems like we're all violently agreeing on stuff. But until now, we are not getting down to specifics of saying, for example, we might have the specific decision that we want to make in January, maybe even, that for the domain model, for example, the breadth of things is not as important for a 2.0 release. Getting a core domain model is sufficient, because extending that domain model seems always possible. But on the other hand, for example, certain basic concepts we must examine now, whether they are part of it or not. So, for example, concentrate on constraints, because if we want to drop constraints, we would have to do this soonishly, I would say. Or if we want to adjust the modifier concept, we should push this early on. So I think actually discussing and deciding upon stuff that we find is important, then looking at it and maybe making recommendations of what to do with it, or putting pressure on the individual groups of dealing with it, I think that's something we must start doing very specifically.
So Pierre, what do you think, in what time frame could there be a draft concept for these basic concepts that you just mentioned?
I think for certain of them, there is already enough draft content there that one could look at them right now. And for other stuff, I think, for example, for constraints, I would hope that that is something that would be available at the beginning of next year, sometimes in the first quarter. I mean, details will have to depend, but that. For some of them, we have already quite a lot of content in the concept, so it is already clear what the pressure points are. For some of them, like modifiers, for example, I definitely think that we are not there yet, and there needs to be more discussion. But I think there's already quite a lot of stuff there that can be looked at least at the level of finding out, do we have a common understanding of it? What are our questions, and addressing them to the relevant working group?
So in that sense, I think this is one of the big reasons we wanted to push for this domain model synchronization meeting before the December holidays. It's precisely to sort of draw this line between breadth and depth of the release. So we can always have like a domain model that contains many elements, but maybe all of this domain model can be more of a roadmap. And we have to get together with the language group to, for example, identify a specific area of the domain. For example, like we can say, okay, we're not going to deal with pedestrians yet. We're going to leave that for 2.1, and let's concentrate on the vehicle actions so that we support the 1.0, 1.x vehicle actions, and we add new required functionalities, right? So we focus on this part of the domain that we want to specify, and then we look what are the core language features, the minimum language features to achieve the desired requirements of 2.0, and focus more on developing the depth in those aspects to make this like a self-contained complete system that can go through an appropriate implementer mindset filter. And then maybe we develop it that way. And then the breadth will be covered in future releases. And maybe that's one way to stagger and sort of break a little bit our chicken and an egg problem by limiting the scope of what we need to test and evaluate before 2.0 is released.
Yeah. Sounds good to me. I think Matthias Büker has his hand raised.
Yeah, I just that we are currently, we have a similar activity also in the semantics group. So this is again a good way to join these activities, to have some core that to start with. And so I think there are already things going on in this direction. So and we should integrate this into this forum.
Yeah, and maybe, for example, the first steps we need to do here is just to ask the right questions. So towards Maximilian, I think definitely looking at it from an implementer's point of view, certain of the concepts already raise quite a number of questions, and putting them in writing and putting them to the semantics group of saying, hey, can you answer this for us? Have you considered this? Is this something that you already know? Might already be helpful. And there are two aspects to that. I mean, the basic questions just on implementability. I mean, if I was starting from scratch, do I even know what this means? Those are obviously the big showstoppers, because even if you can't do it, even with a new implementation, we definitely have a huge problem. But the idea of the implementers forum is to not just have these abstract questions in mind, but actually get exactly the questions. If I'm starting from my current implementation base, what would this mean? And where do I have pressure points? And I mean, for sure, some of them we will always have. I mean, if OpenSCENARIO 2.0 is so easy to implement that every old implementation can easily support it, then why do we do OpenSCENARIO 2.0 in the first place? Because then we're obviously not moving the needle. So let's rather concentrate on the old stuff then. So some stuff necessarily will mean pain to implementers, but some stuff definitely doesn't have to be as painful as it might currently be. And we should adjust the concepts in ways that make it easier to implement this on the current implementations. And so getting that feedback in right now, I think is one of the key problems I'm seeing, because especially from the point of view of resources, I think it's currently very hard because we have so many working groups for implementers to join all of the working groups that might have an impact on their implementations and put this directly into those working groups. I think that's, I mean, it's hard enough for me to even join the language concept subgroups all of the time or any of the time. So the Implementers Forum actually provides a way to concentrate your resources and to a certain extent on that level when it comes to questions of implementability. I mean, there are other questions that the groups must take into account of, is it useful for the user, and is the concept fitting into the overall language and whatever. But implementation is, of course, a key concern. I think this forum can be a channel to channel some of these discussions and to put them in a more efficient way into the process.
So I suggest to try and devote the next 30 minutes that we have to the question of how do we make this forum happen. We spent an hour and a half, and I think we got a good view of what this forum can do and how it can be useful. And now the key question, as I'm looking at it, is okay, let's make it happen. What do we need to do to make it happen?
So one question that I have is, what will be the input to this forum? So I would expect that there is a consolidated paper pile, some kind of packaged draft concepts that we should consider from an implementer's point of view. Of course, I do have team members that are participating in the working groups, and we have access to all of these documents, but I would expect there to be a defined set of documents that is input to this implementers forum, such that everybody starts from the same basis and that we talk about the same stuff.
So I'd suggest there, of course, we can provide access to all the relevant documentation from the project. I think that's a given in any case.
The problem is this is work in progress, and it will change every week, and so
we would be happy if it changed every week.
Okay.
We start with the first step, of course, is identifying where do we start, which points do we want to look at first, which are maybe so far along in the development that it's a concept that isn't going to change daily, and where there's already some form of documentation that is more than just a couple of points in a wiki, which is a bit of an extreme example. But there's a couple of concepts that have been mentioned for which either there's already quite a lot of documentation available, which we can share straight away, or there will be in the near future, as Pierre said, beginning of next year. So we need to identify these ones and make the relevant parts of that information available to the group to review, right?
And in parallel, of course, there's already we are already starting to consolidate stuff. So the idea here is really that ideally until the January meeting, we will have one language reference manual that will contain the collected content of the different working groups as far as it is already ready to be included. So for we already have quite a bit of content in the LC types group, for example. So that will form part of the core of the language reference manual, but I'm trying to coordinate now that we get all of this into one document. And so that, of course, would help our work in this group. But as Ben says, we don't have to wait for this to happen to start discussing things. I think Max Bauer already has some topics on mind, and maybe we can concentrate on making sure that we have the current state of affairs for those and start there.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is something that we're still discussing in the development project, but it's not just the language concepts that we're starting to collate, right? In the past couple of months, we've very much been in the individual group forming stages where the individual groups have been writing content, preparing things. And the goal that we're going to set for ourselves tomorrow in our leads meeting, hopefully, is that all of this content from all of the groups is going to be collated with the support of the service providers active in the project into much more concise documents, so that it's all going to start coming together in the repository. So it'll be much easier, of course, to provide the necessary information, which will give us a good start then for January of next year, or a good basis to work with, because it's centralized in comparison to how it is at the moment.
But on the flip side, that also means, as Gil was saying, we have to decide fairly soon how we are going to work here and if we can make it happen, because January is just around the corner. So I think we also have to agree on a modus operandi here.
Exactly. Right. So how do we do it? Any comments? Any suggestions apart from? So I'm just going to throw a pot again, starting with 1 or 2 concrete examples, maybe using the ones that Max Bauer has prepared, and bringing that as feedback back to the project group to start collecting relevant documentation, making this documentation available to the group, asking the group to review it or provide comments offline, and then having a meeting as a first step in the beginning of January to see if this is a mode of work that makes sense.
I think Igor Klimczynski has raised his hand.
Yes, thank you. I would like to understand, I like the proposal to start reviewing the spec, starting probably from data type definition and following to the behavioral specification. I'm trying to understand, would it be possible for us to do that without having a formal grammar definition? Even a simple one that captures a simple basic concepts.
You can implement your source code. You can implement this concept in your code. Something in. You can ensure that your system is able to for these concepts, right? Instead of compiling the file, you do it internally with the internal data model. And once you can say, okay, I can do this, I can put in front the compiler, which can compile the thing and makes my internal data model. But the implementers should be clear that they can actually do this with their framework, right? That would be one approach. How I did it, for example.
So definitely, I would agree with that approach. While it would be nice to have a grammar, because we already have agreed upon the full syntax, from the point of view of the project timeline, I don't think this is right around the corner just yet. But we do have, I mean, we do have agreements on core concepts that go into the language based on placeholder syntax. So something Python MSDL like is being used in some of the examples. It's being used in the semantics group to express stuff. But really, from my personal feeling, I don't think the grammar is going to be our key problem point there. And I think some of the basic concepts can really be discussed without looking at the details of the grammar. We can just, so to speak, make up the grammar going along, or just assume a certain grammar. That's.
I mean, for some of these concepts, and I'm sure Max will be able to confirm or refute that, we have some basic examples in the concept paper that demonstrate them using an example syntax. And of course, this is an example syntax that's very strongly oriented towards MSDL, because that was a decision in the concept project. But I expect these examples to evolve as the project evolves, or the way that these are formulated. So maybe this is just a good starting point for us, which again will be subject to change as the concepts are developed further in the project.
And for example, for the structural stuff, there are already decisions in there that shape the syntax. So you have complex type, they have fields, the fields have names and so on. The specific surface syntax that you put on that is kind of relevant to look at that. The same is, for example, true on temporal composition. So how you name this and how you formulate this is one thing, but the semantic concepts of the temporal composition and whether they are well defined is also something that can be discussed in the abstract or implemented in the abstract, as Max Bauer was saying. I mean, you will have temporal composition operators one way or another, and where exactly they will hang on the syntax tree is probably not that material right now. But for sure, I mean, definitely we will have to speed up on the syntax side of things. I think some of the decisions are already kind of ripe for decision. It's just that we have to get everyone to sign off on some of them.
Matthias, you have your hand up as well.
He does. Not on my side.
No. If I had, this was not intentionally, but.
But I think as Mr. Nakanishi points out in the chat, the first implementations of C++ were very hard to do for compiler vendors, and the reason for that was not the syntax. I mean, there was some tokenization problems there that were kind of tricky, but that was not what was holding back people. So in that sense, I think we have our work cut out, even if we don't look at the syntax right now.
Yeah, by the way, sorry, that's a good point, because we are defining a really complex language here, which is not on the C++ level here, but people come up with very interesting ideas, which is going in this direction of this complexity. And if Microsoft even failed back then, it's a very good example that we should not overcomplicate the language. Thank you for that example.
Max, do you maybe have a first example that you can just off the top of your head that you can name where you think there's a sufficient development in the concept, a sufficient development of the concepts project that gives us a good basis, and that you also think is a very high priority topic that needs to be addressed? Or Pierre as well, if you're.
Well, the basis I would start is the composites, because they are easy to implement. They are not the pain point, but there are already some pain points. And this is like the real base. And then I would discuss if people are able to declare variables inside this tree. But I think this could be like the first meeting where we could prepare some a few slides, then we could discuss with this group what could be the first steps. What should we focus first? Because if we once have these composites, we can build up trees, and then we see the complexity arising, especially with modifiers and constraints and variable declarations, so you don't get conflicts and everything. So this would be the basic.
So this is the one approach. I see that we've got another approach being suggested by Igor, which some of it has already been done. So in the chat, Igor is proposing that we identify use cases and evaluate how the language can implement them. This is sort of something that we've discussed in the past as well, and this is where this is the usage and pragmatics group as well, which is effectively finding some examples, whether we call them benchmark scenarios, and describing how the language would describe them, and then comparing these different descriptions. So that was part of the initial proposal, and that's a sort of a different approach with the same outcome, I would think, as the one that I'm sharing on the screen here. And I guess
I'm not sure whether it's the same outcome. I think those are two separate activities, and I think we should discuss where we do them, because I find both of them very important. Yeah. But taking on my hat as an implementer, if I'm just looking at the implementation side of things, I don't really care whether someone can do something useful with the language. That's up to the users to decide, and I would hope that someone has discussed this. I'm being asked, you have to implement that, and then I just need to know, can I implement it? I think the other question really is important, of course. And from my point of view, I'm reiterating what I said yesterday. I was under the impression that that is the thing that the user pragmatics group could in the end do and should in the end do. It is coming from the use case and workflows, looking at examples of what kind of scenarios are part of those workflows and whether the language can implement them, whether the language can support them. So is the language strong enough? From my point of view, the other task is looking at is the language not so strong that we can't implement it. So from an implementer's perspective, if we define a language that allows you to do nearly nothing, I can live with that, having my implementer's hat on. Having my product manager's hat on, of course, I would say, yeah, well, but why do it? That obviously is not commercially interesting. But implementation side, the easier the language, the more restricted the features, the more happy I am. So I think both of those should be addressed. I'm just asking, where should we address them?
So Florian, maybe you can provide some comment here as the lead for the Usage and Pragmatics group, because I myself am not sure if this is the direction the Usage and Pragmatics group is taking, and maybe you can just jump in here.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell. So we are trying to address certain things. We have already a completed list, or more or less from our point of view, a completed list of use cases that the language should cover. With different examples. So there should hopefully be everything covered that OpenSCENARIO can help with. The second step for us was to provide process definitions for each use case. So we are not finished there yet. We already have certain process definitions or workflow definitions which include different steps that the user should or wants to take when using OpenSCENARIO to achieve certain goals. So either he wants to create a scenario by hand, or he wants to do some simulation, or he wants to provide some legal documentation for legal institutes. So those different use cases already have some kind of process definitions to a certain level of detail. And we try to complete this until hopefully end of January, so that every use case is at least covered by a process definition. The most important question that is still open is if the rest of the standards, so the syntax and the semantics and the and all those things that are defined in the other working groups, is able to satisfy our requirements. So we are documenting the requirements to the standard, but the question if those requirements are matched, this is a question that we can't answer, because this would require us to review everything that all of the other work group has done, and therefore it's too much for us as a team. So we are depending on the other working group members to review their own stuff and their own content that they created in order and with a perspective on the use case and process definitions that we have created. So that's more or less the state right now that we are in. And there are still some things to do, like the abstraction and concretization workflow that is still not finished. So how can we convert between the different layers of abstraction according to Pegasus? And also this generic process. So the initial goal was to define one generic process which incorporates all of the use cases, and we are not quite sure if it will be possible or if it will just get too complex. We don't know yet, but we will see. And obviously the writing of the documents, or the preparation of our content in a more like structured and readable version, and then the writing of the document itself. So that those are things that are still not finished. But besides that, that's the current status. One thing that is a bit as of a side story, I would say, is the topic of failure and success criteria, because that's a topic that has been excluded in a separate working group led by Sharon Rosenberg. So there, I still don't know the current status because I was away for 6 weeks now, and I did not had a chance to catch up with Sharon and get the update of the current status.
Great. Thanks a lot, Florian. I think yeah, great. I'm still trying to then figure out then how that interfaces with the suggestion there by Igor. And I'm sort of tending towards the fact that actually what Igor is proposing is already being done by the user in pragmatics group. And if not, then maybe this is something that either they should make sure to do or that we at least know where it's being done, because I think the agreement is it's definitely something that needs to be done, but I'm still not sure how far the user in pragmatics group is going in this respect.
Yes, and it also depends on the required level of detail there. So we have some use cases, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have covered all possible use cases, because we only could think about the things that we could think about. So there may be some things missing. And also probably then it would be a good idea for Igor to just review our current use cases if he can find something that is missing, or if the level of detail that we incorporated until now is sufficient for the things that he wants to be answered. And if not, if we could improve that, or if it should be solved by someone else in this topic or whatever.
So I think for the implementers forum, we don't care about, as Pierre already said, we don't care about the use cases itself, but we need actual examples that were coded with OpenSCENARIO 2.0 draft language.
Yeah, that's
so these
also
examples,
what I wanted to say. Yeah,
we need to compare or to show what a tool, how the tool will handle this example, what will be the output of a simulation with this example, and we can compare the output of the vector simulation with the output of the D-space simulation.
Yeah, I totally agree.
This brings us back then to coming up with these examples. And as far as I know, Florian, you guys have not got examples for the use cases that you're talking about yet, right?
No.
Okay. So, and we had some discussions on this in the past as well. And essentially just means we need to come up with a set of scenarios that we think cover the concepts we want to talk about first. And yeah, either in the project group or in the implementers forum or somewhere else, find some, prepare a first write-up or a first description using the OpenSCENARIO 2 draft format of these scenarios and share that. And we've talked about in the past.
I actually have one directly
Great.
from the concept project. It's in MSDL, and the grammar is different, of course, but we can just pick one. It doesn't matter.
We have examples in the concept project. I'm trying to hone us more towards using more thorough examples, for which we have some very concrete examples out there already, and some other high-level examples using the same format that's was used for the concept paper, which is the ALKS set of scenarios.
Yeah, so I think we can always use more examples, but right now, from the point of view of what's holding us back starting to work, I don't think having many examples is the thing that's holding us back. I completely agree that in a second phase, we should, of course, come up and have a set of examples that we can use for example, benchmarking implementations against each other. So the phase 2 thing in terms of cross compatibility and so on. But I would posit that right now we are at the level where it's not even clear whether some of the concepts are well enough defined to actually write an example that two people can agree on. And I think their partial examples are good enough to make progress. So I wouldn't overstate the need for them right now.
Yeah.
But for this, we don't need an implementers forum. So if you cannot write this down in OpenSCENARIO, this is not a matter of implementation.
I think it leads to the implementation, doesn't it? Because it gives you a first idea of how it could be implemented, or alternatively, maybe it's not implementable yet because it's not mature enough or it's not understandable enough, which is important feedback to give back to the group already, right? If you as an implementer say, hey, wait, this is an example that I don't actually know how to implement it, that's important feedback.
So maybe just a concrete proposal of how to proceed, because that was Gil's question also. I would argue the next meeting we should look at one of the examples that Max Bauer is concerned with. Sorry for putting you on the spot. I mean, we can also talk about constraints or whatever, but I think it doesn't really matter where we start.
Yeah,
we should start somewhere and try to do it once to find out whether we know what we're doing and whether it makes sense or not. And I think then some of the more abstract discussions will fall by the wayside and we will find out it works or it doesn't work. I think that's probably the best for the next meeting, to take a look at one issue and try to see what do we need to do this, discuss it, see maybe we're missing examples, then we find out them. I think this makes it much more manageable. Because right now,
yeah,
I think
can help to provide, but we still also need a project leader, which usually does it. I'm not doing the lead.
Yeah, so maybe you're the vice lead.
Maybe you, Pierre, you're a quite good one.
Yeah, the problem is that people are already criticizing the language concepts group, and I think rightly so, that we are not putting out the full language reference menu right now. Given that I'm the lead on that already, I don't think I should take on any more leads. It would just lead to me being even less.
So to be honest, I wonder why Azam cannot take the lead, because this would actually make total sense.
Right now, it would take bylaw
That's your
changes.
revenge for me for putting on the spot, Max, right?
Again, I can provide some presentations, but I cannot organize it. If you organize these things, I can provide slides for these meetings if you ask me, but we need also other people.
Yeah, exactly. The technical content is not necessarily provided by the lead. No doubt about it, right? And let's separate that. So let's keep the topic of the lead as an open invitation to all of you participating in the call, with the goal of identifying a lead by the next meeting or at the end of the next meeting, because by then hopefully everyone will also have a better feeling how, based on this first example, how this group will start to progress, and maybe that'll help you in your decisions of whether this is something where you want to invest into becoming the lead to coordinate this. I think irrespective of that, though, Max, maybe if you just off the top of your head, you said you had 1 or 2 examples. Could you just name those concepts, and I'll just make a note of them. And what we'll do after the meeting today is share in the near future, hopefully share the example and the documentation for this concept, give everyone a chance and provide a platform in an email to allow people to provide some comments on the concept and some offline discussion. And then in the follow jump into a more thorough discussion based on the comments that have been submitted up until then.
Okay, we can have another meeting. We can do that, I guess. Is that good?
Okay, yeah, then you and I will coordinate on that and send that around per email to everyone registered for today. And expect the next meeting to take place in January, which gives us a couple of weeks to start reviewing the content that we'll then send around.
Yeah, and Ben, just to ensure no chicken and egg, for those 2 concepts, you may want to sync with the latest status with the semantics and syntax groups.
Yeah, maybe we have a development project group leads meeting tomorrow. Maybe we can just add that onto the back of the agenda for tomorrow, just so that we're all aligned.
I mean, you could just put me as responsible for making sure this happens, because I'm kind of the default guy who should make sure that this happens.
It's okay. The meeting on Thursday, and we'll put it there.
Yeah. Do we create a Teams channel for this? Which I would suggest we should, if we want to capture the discussion until January.
Yes, but my experience so far has been that the Teams channels have not found much usage. And my question to this group then is, do we have a code repository that we make available and allow people to discuss via the repository? Would you prefer a Teams channel? Open question. We can have both. I don't really mind. It's not a significant
I would actually
amount of
prefer a
resources.
Teams channel, because we do. There's no actual code that we will share, I suppose.
Sorry, Sahil, Slack is unfortunately not an option. Though. Those are the only two options I could provide.
Yeah, but I mean, Teams is the Slack solution, so to speak.
Exactly. Okay, then we'll start with Teams and take it from there. I'll create that and make sure to publish the details in the email that I send out around summarizing today. And that also includes the links to all the relevant concepts and documents that we'll decide on in tomorrow's meeting. So expect that at some point during the day tomorrow.
Maybe one way to ensure that the Teams channel is actually used, I would put the expectation out there that we actually have discussions until January on the Teams channel. So I'm looking forward to having heated discussions on the example and the problems in that channel going forward, which is kind of different to some of the other channels which were just used for let's coordinate the next meeting.
That would be great.
Yeah, I mean, let's see. Let's try it out. If it doesn't work, we'll have to find something else. But I'm hoping that everyone has its opinion. I mean, in language implementation terms, everyone has an opinion, and it's always the right one. So I'm hoping for some heated discussions there.
Great. Any other comments, questions, quick ones before we finish off for today? In that case, thanks everyone for your time. And again, I'll expect an email from me tomorrow at some point during the day that summarizes today and the next steps and the relevant documentation for the first concept to be reviewed. If you have any questions or comments in the meantime, just get in touch with me via email or give me a call. And thank you all for your time. And I look forward to gaining some momentum in this. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye.